A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Chapter 8, Part 13. Of Satan's Third Way to Hinder Peace, by Spiritual Sadness. Wherein, 1. Of the degrees of spiritual sadness. 2. Of the frequency of this trouble, evidenced several ways. Of the difference betwixt God and Satan in wounding the conscience. 3. Of the solemn occasions of this trouble. 4. The engines by which Satan works spiritual sadness. 1. His sophistry. His topics enumerated and explained. 1. Scriptures perverted. 2. False notions. 3. Misrepresentations of God. 4. Sins, how he aggravates them. 5. Lessening their graces, how he doth that. 2. His second engine, fear, how he forwards his design that way. 5th, or when the progress of grace is small and imperceptible. 6th, or while in the absence of the sun, which produceth flowers and fragrancy, and is the time of the singing of birds, Canticles 2, 11, 12, it is forced to cast off its summer fruits of joy, and sensible delights, and only produceth winter fruits of lamenting after God, longing and panting after him, justifying of God in his dealings and condemning itself, all this while sowing in tears for a more pleasing crop. 7th, or while expectations are more than enjoyments, the man it may be promised himself large incomes, of greater measures of comforts, ease, or strength, under some particular ordinances, or helps which he hath lately attained to, and not finding things presently to answer what he hoped for, is now suspicious of his case, and thinks he hath attained nothing, because he hath not what he would. 8th, sometimes Satan shows them his face, in this glass when it is foulest, through the spots of some miscarriage. 9th, or he takes advantage of some natural defects, as one of tears, which might be more usual in former times, but are now dried up. Or from the ebbings and uncertainty of his affections, which are never sure rules of trials. 10th, or in such acts that are of a mixed nature, in the principles and motives, where it may seem to be uncertain to which, the act must be ascribed as to the true parent. The heart of a gracious person being challenged upon any of these points, and under so great a disadvantage, being called out to give a proof of himself, especially in the view of grace set forth, in all its excellency and glory, shall have little to plead, but will rather own the accusation. And the rather because. 3. It is another part of Satan's cunning to urge them, whilst they are thus at a stand, with a possibility, nay, a probability of their mistaking themselves, by passing too favorable an opinion formerly of their actions. To confirm them in this apprehension, first, he lays before them the consideration of the deceitfulness of the heart, Jeremiah 17, 6, which, being so above all things, and desperately wicked beyond ordinary discovery, makes a fair way for the entertainment of a suspicion of self-delusion, in all the former hopes, which a man hath had of himself. Satan will plainly speak it, thou hast had some thoughts and workings of mine towards God, but seeing they carry so great a disproportion to rule and example, and come so far short of common graces, it is more than probable that such poor, weak, confused appearances are nothing. How knowest thou that thine adherence to, and practice of the command and services of God, are any more than from the power of education, the prevalency of custom, or the impressions of moral persuasion? How dost thou know that thy desires after God, and thy delight in him, are any more than the products of natural principles, influenced by an historical faith of Scripture doctrine? It is oftentimes enough for Satan to hint this. A suspicious heart, as it were greedy of its own misery, catcheth at all things that make against it. And hence complains that it hath no grace, because it sees not any visible fruits, or makes not a sufficient appearance at all times when opposed or resisted. Or because it wants sensible progress, or gives not the summer fruits of praises, rejoicings, and delights in God. Or because it seems not to meet with remarkable improvements and ordinances. Or because it cannot produce tears and raise the affections. And because the party doth not know, but his heart might deceive him in all that he hath done. Which the devil yet further endeavoureth to confirm. Second, by a consideration of the seeming holiness and graces, of such as believed themselves to be the children of God, and were generally by others reputed so to be, who yet, after a glorious profession, turned apostates. This being so great and undeniable, an instance of the heart's deceitfulness, makes the poor tempted party conclude that he is certainly no true convert. Thus have we seen Satan's sophistry, in the management of those 5 grand topics, from whence he draws his false conclusions against the children of God, pretending to prove that they are not converted. or at least if they be in a state of grace, that they in that state are in a very bad, unsuitable condition to it. For if his arguments fall short of the first, they seldom miss the latter mark. This was his first engine. Now follows 2. The other engine by which he fixeth these conclusions, which, though it be not argumentative, yet it serves to sharpen all his fallacies, against the comforts of God's children. This is fear, which, together with his objections, he sends into the mind. That Satan can raise a storm and commotion in the heart by fear, hath been proved before. I shall now only in a few things show how he doth forward his design by astonishing the heart, with his frightful thunderings. 1. His objections being accompanied with affrightments, they pass for strong undeniable arguments, and their fallacy is not so easily detected. Fear, as well as anger, darkens reason, and disables the understanding to make a true, faithful search into things, or to give a right judgment. As darkness deceives the senses, and makes every bush frightful to the passenger, or as muddied waters hinder the sight, so do fears in the heart disable a man to discover the silliest cheat that Satan can put upon it. 2. They are also very credulous. When fear is up, any suggestion takes place. As suspicious incredulity is an effect of joy, the disciples at first hearing that Christ was risen, for joy believed it not, so suspicious credulity is the effect of fear. And we shall observe several things, in the servants of God that show a strange inclination, as it were a natural aptitude, to believe the evil of their spiritual estate, which Satan suggests to them. As, first, there is a great forwardness and precipitancy, in the heart, to close with evil thoughts raised up in us. When jealousies of God's love are injected, there is a violent hastiness forthwith, all calm deliberation being laid aside, to entertain a belief of it. This is more than once noted in the Psalms. In this case, David acknowledgeth this hasty humor. I said in my haste, Psalm 31, 22, and 116, 11. This hasty forwardness to determine things that are against us without due examination, Asaph calls a great weakness. This is my infirmity, Psalm 77, 10. Second, there is observable in those that are under spiritual troubles, a great kind of delight, if I may so call it, to hear threatenings rather than promises, and such discourses as set forth the misery of a natural state, rather than such as speak of the happiness of the converted. Because these things, in their apprehension, are more suitable to their condition, and more needful for them, in order to a greater measure of humiliation, which they suppose to be necessary. However, thus they add fuel to the flame. Third, they have an aptitude to hide themselves from comfort, and with a wonderful nimbleness of wit and reasoning, to evade and answer any argument brought for their comfort, as if they had been volunteers in Satan's service, to fight against themselves. Fourth, they have also so great a blasting upon their understanding, that Satan's tempting them to doubt of their good estate, is to them a sufficient reason to doubt of it. And that is ground enough for them to deny it, because Satan questions it. 3. These fears make all Satan's suggestions strike the deeper. They point all his arrows and make them pierce, as it were, the joints and marrow. They poison and envenom them, to the great increase of the torment and hindrance of the cure. They bind the objections upon them, and confirm them in a certain belief that they are all true. We have now viewed Satan's engines and batteries, against the servants of the Lord, for the destruction of their joy and peace, by spiritual troubles. But these are but the beginnings of sorrows, if compared with those distresses of soul, which he sometimes brings upon them. Thanks.